Okay. All right. Let me share my preso. Give me a minute. Give me a minute. PowerPoint. All right. Can you see my presentation? Not yet. Share. Um, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. All right. So we discussed about internet connection last week. We discussed about modem and routers, and we discussed about the protocols. Um, some of you had some questions, and I will probably touch upon that towards the end of this session or next session. So what we're going to discuss today is a couple of things around how internet browsing happens, what is the protocol that is being used, what is about HTTP, what is about HTTPS. I think we touched upon that a bit as well. The next one that we are talking about will go into a bit of domain name, URL. Yeah, we discussed that a bit as well. So yeah, we discussed about modem and routers, different types of cables and all that. So we'll come into some of them. Some of you had questions around what is broadband, what is internet connection, dial-up, DSL, ADSL, and all that. We will come to it as well today. And probably that is how we will cover the day today or the session today. Okay, now just to give you a bit of a recap, we discussed about internet, we discussed about DNS. Do you remember that? Any one of you? Anyone of you remember what DNS is all about? Yes or no? No? Yes? Can you guys unmute and talk, please? Anyone remember what is a DNS? It's going to be a bit hard if you don't talk, because I wouldn't know what you guys are understanding what I'm talking about or no. Call names. Rishikesh, what do you think? What's DNS? Are you talking while on mute? Can I unmute you? Let me check.
Sir, I was not there in the last session. Uh, I didn't seen the YouTube video. I will see it today.
Okay. All right. Okay. Anyone else? Yep. Someone else volunteering.
And domain name is like a company uses it for its work. Like suppose a company wants.
No. I didn't ask about domain name. I asked about DNS. I asked about DNS. Don't look at the screen. Do you remember what is DNS?
I wasn't there last minute.
Okay. Okay. So DNS is nothing but like an address book, right? So if you have an address book or a diary where you have names against a number, say for example, my name is put against a number, that telephone number. Similar to that, in the world of internet, you got something called as a DNS, which is nothing but a domain name server. A domain name server converts a URL. What is a URL? URL is the website address that you type on the Internet Explorer or Chrome or whatever browser that you want to access. When you type that URL, that URL is converted into a number, which is called as an IP address. Okay. Now the record which stores the number IP address against the URL, that particular service is called domain name service. Okay, it is similar to the diary. Where you have a record of all the names against the telephone numbers. So if someone wants to dial me, if you have my name written in your diary as J and then against my number, then you can pick up my number from that and then dial me. Likewise, when you type google.com, basically your internet connection, as I discussed last week, I urge you to go into the video and have a look at it for you to understand what I am talking about. It will go and look up into this server and then check what is the IP address that that browser needs to connect to. So you've got your laptop, you've got your mobile phone, everything connected to your router, and the router in turn connects to a modem. Modem connects into the DNS. It will look up on the DNS as to what is the IP address that this google.com is referring to. Now, once it finds the IP address, it will forward the connection, which is initiated from your browser, and then it goes directly into that particular server. Now, when it reaches that server, what happens? The server receives that request saying that, say, for example, one of you, Rishikesh, types www.google.com. Rishikesh's internet connection takes him into the local DNS, or which is localized to that geographical region. It goes there and then look up for google.com's IP address, and it turns out that it is probably 10.10.10.10. I will explain why that numbering system and all these things a bit later. Anyway, it gives a number and it will take Rishikesh's connection or internet request directly into that particular server somewhere in US probably, or somewhere in near to your geographical region. Now, when you reach that IP address is nothing but a server or a computer which is sitting there, and it has got a web page on that particular server. Now, this request goes all the way. This request, which in the form of HTTP, I discussed about what is HTTP last week. I'm not going to do that again. So when that request goes all the way into that server is called a web server. In this case, google.com. It will respond saying that, hey, I've got a web page to present to you. So it will respond by rendering a page, and that page and the data goes all the way to Rishikesh's computer. It gets displayed there in the form of HTML page. HTTP request goes into a server responds to that HTTP request, and that data comes to the server onto the browser in the form of that data is then displayed in the form of a HTML page. And then you see the page google.com. Make sense? Okay, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to switch to my whiteboard. We discussed about this, yes, last week. Don't save. Okay, now I'm going to
Jay, we are still on this presentation screen. We can't hear. Are others able to hear, Jay? I know the screen is changed.
Sir, even I can hear.
Yeah, when you switch to the screen, suddenly your voice we are not able to hear. Jay.
what is happening? I don't know what is happening.
Yeah, now yes.
Sir, now we can hear you.
Okay, all right. I was just trying to switch the screen to to a whiteboard so that I can explain to you what is happening. So as I said, you go to your laptop, and at the laptop you've got a modem, right? Or Wi-Fi router, whatever you want to call it. It establishes a connection to the internet. The internet is usually displayed in the form of a cloud, okay, which means that it's got trillions of computers connected to each other, which is called, which is why it is called like that. Anyway, so once that is there, then what is the next step? Where does it go? So when someone types www.google.com into your laptop, which is connected to internet, what happens? One of you have to guide me now. So the request comes from the laptop to the modem, goes to the internet, and then reaches where?
Server.
What server?
So the internet service provider.
Yep, that's fine. And then, so assuming you've got the internet service provider at this side, which is called the ISP, you've got your connection established. Now you're typing www.google.com. The www.google.com is a string which you type on the browser, correct? On your browser, you say
Yes, sir.
www.google.com. Yeah. So, okay, let me explain that. Let me open my Internet Explorer for the time being. Any browser, doesn't really matter. Okay, so are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, so when I type, I'm connected to internet, you can see that. You can see that I'm connected to internet. That is why this symbol is coming here. Now I'm typing www.google.com. What happens? This page gets rendered, right? Correct?
Yes, sir.
Now,
Yes.
how does that happen? So that is what I was asking you guys. I'm just going back to my paint. So I've got my laptop connected and I open the browser and then I hit www.google.com. I've got a modem and router at home and the router is connected to internet through my ISP. What happens next when the moment I type www.google.com, what happens next?
Sir, I guess the modem established a secure connection to go and connect to the Google server.
How does it know when I type google.com, it has to go to that particular server in Google?
So because the string value is saved as the Google server.
Yeah, but how? That is what is the purpose of DNS. This is how we started the session today. A DNS is called a domain name service. Okay. This is nothing but when you type www.google.com, I will show you that. So this is from Australia. I'm typing this from Australia. It doesn't. Non-existent domain. That is because it doesn't have that address. Okay. Now, so when I type google.com, so do you see my screen, which is in black color?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, so that's my command prompt. Oh, what is the command? Yep. ns lookup google.com. Okay, now what happens is it goes to a server. If you see my top end of the screen, it says 192-168-1.1.tpgi.com.au. That server, which is highlighted here, is the DNS server. Okay. Now that DNS server is connected to my modem. So that DNS server has got a direct link with my modem because that ISP has got a DNS server here. That is why. Make sense? Now in the DNS server, there is a record for google.com and the IP address for that is 142.250.67.14. Did you see that number? Do you see
Yes.
that number? That number is called the IP address of google.com. So when you connect your laptop, the other way to get that IP address, okay, if you see, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
What was that number? 142.250.67.14. Okay, 142.250.67.14. See, the google.com came. Do you see that? Do you see my page?
Yes, sir.
My browser. So you can reach me by, so just to give a bit of an example, when you look up your name in your directory, you would have saved it against J and my telephone number. Likewise, DNS also has a number associated with it, which is called the IP address. Okay, now that IP address is all the internet or all the networking devices connect between each other using something called as IP address. It doesn't connect based on names because there could be the similar names, but the IP addresses will be different. So if you type the google.com from your end, say for example, you are in India or UAE or Kuwait or Qatar or wherever it is, each of your country has got a has got a Google server attached to it. It could be same, it could be different. So if you want to see what is the google.com's IP address on belonging to your country, you can just go and then type this command nslookup google.com. You can also, like, if you want yahoo.com. See, it's got multiple IP address attached to it. There are many servers belonging to Yahoo, which has that IP address. So you might connect to one of the servers when you type yahoo.com. Maybe try with whatever you want. I mean, give me an example and I can try that for you if it connects from here. And let's look up, give me a website. What's the website you want me to check?
YouTube.
YouTube. Yeah, good one. Look at that. YouTube is on. See, if you look at a pattern, look at that 140, 250, 67. So if you look at that, you can kind of understand both of them starts with 142, right? Which to me
Yes.
indicates that both google.com and youtube.com sort of belong to the same network. But obviously the address is different. But if you look at it from a very high level, you can see that 142.250 and the other one is 142.250 as well. The only the remaining two part of the octet is different. That's
So,
how. Yep.
so can we tell that this DNS is a numeral form for the google.com or any server like
Yeah.
that?
So any IP address is any URL is converted into an IP address, which can be called as which is the mechanism using which the network connectivity happens between two computers.
But then, sir, we can also use the binary form, right? Instead of using this domain, like we can use the binary form and give it a name, right?
Yeah, but then your application which you are using, your browser, is not binary enabled. It's actually alphanumeric. It actually supports the decimal characters. So if you have a software which only accepts um, binary, then of course you can do that.
Okay, sir.
So basically, to make things easy for people, the software developers have converted. So end of the day, if you look at it, everything happens on a binary format. So that 140, I'll talk about it in a bit after, but end of the day, everything is binary. So this
Okay.
142 gets internally converted as a binary when it gets transported from your laptop to whichever laptop it goes, because that's how all these devices understand. That's the only language which they understand. But for it to be easy for you guys, what has happened is the display format has been changed into the decimal format or a hexadecimal format or whichever format they want to do.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Any other question? So that's just to give a bit of a idea how the internet connectivity works. So basically, any two computers connect to each other using their IP addresses, which is also called Internet Protocol address. Okay. Sorry, that was wrong screen. This is called IP address. Excuse my bad handwriting. Basically, it stands for Internet Protocol address. Internet Protocol address. Okay, that's how it works. All right, now next topic is about modems and routers. Again, coming back to modems, we will talk about routers. We'll talk about switches. Then we will talk about IP addressing. Once I do all this, then I will talk about something called as OSI layer. Okay. I'm not sure if it would be really interesting for you, but unless I talk about this particular OSI layer, the lessons that I am taking will not add any value to you. So I will have to go through that with you guys. But just to give a bit of a glance about what OSI layer is, before that, I will talk about routers and switches. Okay. All right, let's go to routers. Okay, so as I said, so what is a domain name? Domain name is a set of words, letters, or numbers, or a combination of all these to describe a unique individual or enterprise in a way that's easy to remember. So rather than addressing someone like Google in the form of 152.250.1.1. Whatever, it is very difficult to kind of remember the name, remember the number as opposed to the name. So you would probably know me as Jay as opposed to my telephone number. Yeah, it's very difficult to sort of relate something to a number rather than a name. So it's always better if you have a user-friendly mechanism by which you connect to an individual or a company or an enterprise or whatever. Yeah, so that is why this mechanism of conversion of a name to number using a DNS came into existence, because it was making it easy for people to understand. So some of the examples like facebook.com, india.gov.in, whatever. Yeah. So what happens? When the URL contains a domain name, the browser first connects to a domain name server, which is called as DNS, and retrieves the corresponding IP address. Okay. Oh, what did I do? I did something wrong. The web browser then connects to the web server and sends an HTTP request. That's a protocol for the desired web page. So what happens? You get a web page, a response from that particular web server. If there is something available to respond to you, it will say, yes, I have got a page to respond to. Otherwise, it will say, I don't have anything. And that error, that is called as an error situation, that error situation will come as page not found. So let me try that for you. Let me try a page not found situation. Okay, so now if I type this, how do I hide this thing? Yeah, okay. Okay, let us type the situation. Maybe it's available. See, did you see that? You guys can see this?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So what do you see that number 404?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we can.
What does that mean?
It means that there is an error while searching, while
Why
connecting to the.
why is there an error?
So because it can't find the requested domain name service.
So yes. So what you do is, your domain name is kind of split into two. So there is your first part is called as the protocol. It can be HTTP or HTTPS. Okay. I will talk in detail about that a little bit later. And then you've got a : / and then followed by the actual name of the server, followed by whatever page or whatever page or a content you want to access. So if you ask for a mail, okay, it might open the mailbox, okay, because there is something similar to that. But if I say Jay or Rishi, whatever, see, these are not available in that server. The server cannot find a page or a content called Rishikesh in that server. That is why it is returning saying that, sorry, I couldn't find that on the server. Having said that, if you look at it, it says 404. 404 is a HTTP standard protocol for handling error code. Okay, it means that the content you were trying to access is unavailable.
Sir,
Okay,
I
that is,
also got error 404 when I tried.
yeah. So if you randomly type something which isn't existent on a particular server, you will definitely type, we will get a 404 error. Okay. All right. Which is my page. Okay, I'm just going back to my page. Um, so once you receive the page, then effectively that particular connection gets closed. Then what happens is, so as I said to you, right? So when you make a connection from your laptop to a server, the server responds to that HTTP request this way, and it comes to your browser. A browser has got a front end. Okay, that's a screen. That's a front end screen. That front end screen has got data which is coming in this format. If you do a view page source, you will see that. See, look at that. Do you see that? That's the data which came from that server. And this particular program or this particular data is called as a HTML page. So it actually transfers the data from the server, web server, back to your computer in this format. This is the data which came in. So if you look at that, it says that, it has got all these things. So it has got a font and it has got everything written there. It is actually using your computer's font to display this information. Okay. Do you see this? Does it make sense to you?
Yes,
So
sir.
the data which comes back from that computer was not that picture. The data which came back from this computer was in this format. Okay. The picture also came in, but the picture came in a different format. See, they have said, go to this particular site and then called the picture. Okay, so you created a web page, and that web page had and that a lot of these parameters built in. Okay, now I'll try to write a web page. Okay, all right, I'll show you this. This is just for you to this is just for you to understand. That's all. This could be you might have done this before. Not bad. So control. Oh, I can't find the. How do I hide this bloody thing? I'm just trying to understand. All right, hang on. Okay. Ah, okay. Oh, I think you can write hello. Let's see what happens. Maybe something will happen. I will store it in my personal file and then say hello. Oh, sorry. Save as. I did the wrong thing. I should save this as hello.html. Now what happens if I try to open that file? Let's see. I don't know. It's been a while since I did all these things. Let's go to that folder. So assuming that someone is trying to connect to my server, which you can't at this point in time, but assuming that someone is connecting to the server, and if my laptop is connected to internet and the DNS has got my entries, so what happens then? Okay, I go to HTML, hello. See, look at that hello in the form of Chrome. Let's open that and see what happens. See, I wrote hello and it came as hello. So does it make sense? So I saved a file in my laptop with the name hello.html. And when you open it, when you click the source of that comes as this hello.html. That's the hello.html that I wrote. So effectively, it is nothing but a plain text of file, which is actually stored on my server or a Google server with a lot of these parameters written in. When it comes to your laptop, you've got something called as a browser, and the browser is something which converts a HTML page into a user displayable format. Does it make sense? So if I wanted to do something like this, I don't want this to be a HTML class, but what I am just trying to say is whatever which comes over the wire from internet comes in the form of a data packet, which has got a lot of data. It is up to your computer on your laptop or your mobile phone, the browser, which actually displays it in the form of what is required to be displayed. Okay. So the file which is actually coming in is a much thinner file than what is actually being shown. So if you think that, what is being displayed on the browser is, oh, there's a lot of things, but it's actually coming in as a bunch of text and characters. Okay. That's all. Does it make sense to you guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, okay, now coming back to that statement, the web browser receives the page back and connection is closed. The browser then parses this page and looks for other page elements it need to complete the web page. So that HTML page, HTML is a markup language. It is just like a programming language in simple terms. And that language has got a different defined set of characters within it. So it actually goes through each and every those characters and then displays it in the form of a browser. Okay. And it might have images, it might have small snippets or applets or all of these kind of things. A combination of all of that becomes a web page. Okay, now the 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 writing of that web page by itself is a profession in IT industry, where in which there are people who are called web designers, and there are people who actually uses their creativity to bring in bigger designs, better designs, and user friendly designs and all these things. So that by itself is a profession which people can pursue, but that requires a bit of creativity in terms of how you design it, how you color it, and stuff like that. What I do is what is happening at the back end in terms of how you actually make the connectivity happen between the two. What someone like Satish, he's actually, I think, into IT development and stuff, so he does these kind of creative things. Yeah, so there are situations where within a web page or within an HTML page, there could be references to other web pages. So you might have seen, for example, a BBC website, or a CNN website, one of these websites. If you look at it, I mean, if you open it, or if a Yahoo website for that matter, it might have a lot of these contents which is displayed, and then there could be other links to other websites from that website, which is called as hyperlinks. Okay, so each of those web pages can actually be used to make a connection to another web page. But regardless of how you do it, the mechanism by which you connect from one computer to the other computer follows the same procedure. When you click on a hyperlink, what it does is hyperlink goes and then connects to the DNS, resolves it against an IP address, goes to that particular IP address, and then request for that particular web page. And then if there is a web page there, it will come respond. If there is no web page there, it will say 404. Okay. Okay. Now comes the modem and router. We actually touched upon modems and routers a bit in the last class, so I'm not going to go deep into what is a modem and router unless someone wants me to. I will probably touch upon modems and routers. So modem is something which helps you connect to the internet, using multiple methodologies. And the purpose of a modem is to carry your data across to the other end, or whichever ISP end, in the form of what? In the form of what? I explained to you last week. Do you remember, any one of you? We spoke of
Waves.
yeah, in the form of waves, and that there is a particular word which converts the data from your end and it carries it to the other end. There is a particular word that we discussed. Remember that? I can't remember who all were there in the last meeting. I'm sorry about this. Okay, anyway, so that word is called, what I'm looking for is modulation. Do you remember that? What is modulation?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so okay, so we spoke about modulation, we spoke about demodulation. So that is what a modem does. Then there is something called as a router. What does a router do? Do you remember that?
So
Okay,
a
so
router helps
yeah,
us to connect to the internet service provider.
yes, everything helps to connect to the internet service provider, but what exactly is a modem? What exactly is a router? Don't save. Okay, I'll explain to you now. Okay, assuming, okay, excuse my drawing, guys, I'm not very good at that, but then I'll just try to have you so this just consider this as a intersection, as a four-way junction. Okay, you're going from, say, source A to source B, C, D. Okay, now assuming that there are a lot of these cars going this way, right? There is a person standing there usually, or a signal, traffic signal, which is there, which actually, assuming that this lane is closed. Okay, so usually I don't know if this happens in your city. There are chances that a lane gets closed, and then there is a person standing there who will actually redirect you to a different route, right? He's generally a traffic police or a person who is deputed to do that function. There are some cases where, depending on the traffic person might ask you to go around this path. There could be another packet going down, car going down this path, all destined to, say, for example, B. Now, that functionality of that person who is sitting here and then channeling the traffic in a way is the function of a router. Okay. A router is nothing but a device which, so assuming that you've got a mobile phone, um, you've got a mobile phone, you got a computer, you got a tab, a mobile, and a PC. Okay, all connected through Wi-Fi. The symbol that I'm using is Wi-Fi symbol. Okay, so you've got a device here which is called as a Wi-Fi router, and then there is a device attached to it which is a modem, and the modem connects to radio or wireless or whatever, and then connects to internet. That's the, you can call it as the ISP, connect to internet, and that there is a DNS server. There is other servers connected to internet, Google, Facebook, Yahoo. Okay, assuming that you are trying to connect using your browser, you are saying youtube.com. What happens? You are connected to your modem through your router, your Wi-Fi. Okay, the modem, the router gives, sorry, the Wi-Fi gives you the functionality of switching. Okay, once it reaches the Wi-Fi, that particular device, it connects to internet through a protocol called as routing. What happens? Okay, new. I'll just keep it for the time being, otherwise. Okay, so what happens, right? So when, for example, Rishi connects from his mobile, and then he says, I want to connect to yahoo.com. Now what happens is you have an IP address. So the way you can do that is CMD. If you can all open your laptop and then type CMD in your start button, can you do that? Can you do that? Can all of you do that? If anyone is finding it difficult to do that, please let me know. All you have to do is to write CMD. It might come as a black window or whatever type of window it is. Does it come? Say yes or no, guys, please.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you type this command? ipconfig, ipconfig, and then enter. Something comes up.
So
Yes,
what do
sir.
we have to type?
IP. Just look at what I am doing on the screen. CONFIG. Can you get it? Are you getting it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you get similar to what I've got?
Yes, sir, like wireless LAN and all.
Yes. So what has happened is you are getting this IP address. Do you get 192.168, those kind of numbers there?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you might get a IPv4 address, and then you might get a 192.168.1.102. What happens? Do you know what happens when you type ipconfig command? That IP address, which is shown here as 192.168, this is in my case, 1.102, is actually the IP address of my laptop in my home network. Okay. And whatever IP address you are getting, can one of you, if you don't mind, tell me what IP address you are getting? You can look against the value IPv4 address.
Sir, I got 192 point, no,
Uh,
no,
yeah, that's right.
192.168.100.20.
Okay, so your IP address is 192.168.100.20, right? So
Yes,
if you have another computer at home, for example, you might get a IP address 21 or 19 or 18 or whatever that is, right? So you could get any of these IP addresses in your machine. Who gives you that IP address? That IP address is given by your Wi-Fi router or your router at home. Not necessarily the Wi-Fi, but whatever your switch that is connected to or the router that is connected to, either through the form of a router or through the form of a Wi-Fi or a cable, whatever is the media, that's given by that particular device. So when you say that you are connecting to Wi-Fi, basically what happens is that Wi-Fi network gives you an IP address. Okay, make sense? Does this make sense to everyone? Is
yes,
anyone
sir.
who is not getting it?
So, sir,
Maybe.
all the IP addresses start with 192.
Yeah. So I'll tell you why all the IP address starts with 192 at a later point, because that's I want you to understand this. I will get there soon. Okay.
The
Okay, sir.
others who have
But
posted what they've got in chat, okay. But Abraham has written 3.105. That can't be
he might be looking at a different. So you should look at. Um, so Abraham, you should look at what is written against um, opposite to this IPv4 address. You might be looking at something about from the DNS perspective.
Sir, I am using the wired connection.
Okay, that's fine. Doesn't matter. Clear CLS ipconfig -a ipconfig. Are you using a dial-up connection or something? What connection are you using? Are you using a mobile connection?
No, sir, Ethernet.
Yeah, but Ethernet through a mobile, or
Modem.
have you hotspotted to a mobile?
No, modem, sir.
Okay, so you should not be getting you should be getting somewhere around a 192 IP address, unless someone has done something with your address scheming. That could be a reason, but it usually that. Are you getting it against the IPv4 address?
Yes, sir.
Okay, don't know. Could be any reason, or it could be using an ISP or using something else.
Something else, sir. Something else.
What does that something else? Okay, give me a minute. I'm just trying to. Okay, so end of the day. So whatever that IP address is, the IP address provided by your router, not your ISP. That is provided by your router directly to your computer. Okay. Now, what happens? Okay. Okay. Now, your laptop sitting here, then there is this router. I'm just putting it as a big device. And then there is a modem attached to it. Establishes an internet connection through an ISP, right? And what happens is every device that is connected here, assuming that there are multiple computers here, okay? Every device gets an IP address. Now that is in the range of 192.168, most likely, unless you define your own network internally. 10, 100.20, 21, 22, whatever, right? It will be in a sequence, which is, I'll talk about that sequence a little bit after as well. Now, these IP address, when it comes to the router knows that, okay, this belongs to my network. Now, what happens when the modem is connected? This router will convert all this IP address into another IP address. What it does is it will do something called as masking. It will say, okay, 192.168.10.10 belong to a router which has got 3.10.1.2. My outside interface, so there is an internal interface, there is an external interface that is called as ingress, just for the understanding, and there is another called as egress. Okay, so inbound to the router, outbound from the router. Inbound has got a series of IP address numbers, which this router is aware. Outbound has got a series of IP address, or probably one or two IP address. What it'll do is it'll convert this IP address into this IP address, and then it'll take it outside. Now, this address is available at the internet service provider. Okay, now let me do that. ISP, home, this is internet. Assume this has 3 different sections. Okay. Home and internet needs to connect, and that is enabled by this guy, gentleman, who is in the middle, which is called as the ISP. That ISP will have and all the devices which are available in the internet, Google, Facebook, Yahoo, Hotmail, all of them has got a public IP address, which is called as a celebrities. They are celebrities. They have got public names. Okay. But the person inside the home do not have a public IP address, because none of the people external to that home knows who are there inside the home. So we classify them as private people. Okay. So we are not public. We are not celebrities who are inside the house. Okay. So everyone knows Amitabh Bachchan, but no one knows Jayakrishnan. Okay. That's the example. So Jayakrishnan is a private guy. Amitabh Bachchan is a public figure. Okay. Now, assuming that a private person wants to connect to the public person, what will do? This guy is the man in the middle, which helps you do that. Okay. All right. Okay. Now I'll give you a different diagram. I'm switching between diagram just for a purpose, just to make you explain. You remember that diagram, right? You've got a home, you've got an ISP, you've got a public domain. Okay. Now, from the home, you've got different devices. All these different devices belong to, just for the sake of understanding, assuming that 192.168.0.1, 2, 3, 4. Now, here is the ISP guy who is sitting in the middle, which has got a router here, and there is an external interface here. This connects to, say, for example, google.com. I'm just taking one example. Okay. What happens is when from inside the house, why is this going away? When from inside the house, I type www.google.com, what happens is the router here will convert this 192.168 IP address. We'll convert this 192.168 IP address, and this guy has got an IP address. We saw that, right? 142.250.1.1, just as an example. 192 and 142 cannot connect, okay, because this is private. 192 is private. So what the ISP does is it will give this 192.168 IP address a masked IP address. Okay, that masked IP address is provided by the router. When you subscribe for an internet connection, the ISP provides you with a public IP address. Okay, and that public IP address could be 20.20.20.1. Okay, now what this ISP does when you connect it to internet is it will mask your 192.168.0.1 IP address with this IP address. So what is it like? You're putting a mail, and on top of it you're having an envelope, and on the envelope you're saying this is belonging to 20.20.20.1, not 192.168.0.1. So that Google says, oh, I know this guy. This guy belongs to this ISP. So it will send a reply back to 20.20.20.1. Once the reply reaches back to the router knows, oh, I know where this came from. The router translates this IP address back to 192.168.0.1. Is it too confusing for you? Did you understand what happens? Guys, don't be so quiet.
Yes, sir.
Understood? All of you?
Yes. Yes.
It's like a bit confusing.
Okay, what part did not? That's good. Thank you for that. What part did you did not understand?
How the router connects to the how it changes, how it translates the form. I didn't understand that.
Okay, good. I will explain that to you once more. Okay. Why is this not come? Okay, hang on a minute. I'll just turn on the lights here. Yep. Okay. So what happens? What happens is that, as I told you, I've got a 192.168, assuming this is your home, and the home has got a router attached to it. This router has got a table, okay? It's like a book, okay? And the table has got, on the left-hand side, it has got 192.168. That is your laptop. Then probably your parents' laptop has 168.0.2. Then your sibling's laptop 192.168.3. Then you've got phone 192.168.4, likewise. So this router guy maintains a register like this. I've got 4 IP address here. Now 192.168 connects to Google. It maintains a table. Okay, this guy connects to Google. Now your parents connects to Facebook. It maintains a record there, facebook.com. Every connection which goes into the router, he maintains a record like this. Okay. Now when it goes out, all the connection goes out with an IP address, which is starting with 20.1.1.1, because the router's IP address is 20.1.1.1. And this 20.1.1.1 is a public IP address because that IP address is known to everyone in the world. But once in 192 series is not known to anyone in the world. That's called a private IP address. Okay. And the router is the one which maintains a record of who is browsing where. Okay. So when it goes out, it attaches this IP address to that and then sends it out. Google says, I know where to respond to. it goes back to 20.1. The moment it reaches back here, this record is again looked up. It looks, oh, google.com is coming from this guy. And because it has got a record here, it just goes back to this particular person, which is this laptop you are connecting from. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so this table is called as a routing table. Routing table. It's a massive table. It keeps record of all the inbound and outbound connections, and then it translates your private IP address to a public IP address. That's the function of a router. Okay. Is it okay now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think we are almost 5 o'clock here.
Very similar to how post office works. When you are telling
Yeah,
this,
I will talk about that. You know, all this, the details of all this, how this works in the next session. It is a bit. So you need to apply yourself a bit into this, and then you will understand everything. And it's very you know, at times it can go a bit dry. I'll try to make it as simple as possible, but there is only an extent to which I can make it so simple, because it is not as simple as that. But you know, if you apply your mind to it, you will understand, because it's all about maintaining a log register of what is coming in, what is going out. So if you look at assuming that you've got your school has got a security standing outside, and then security tags everyone which is going in and tags everyone which is going out, assuming that that scenario. Okay, so any person who is going with a uniform, security says, okay, go, this is your exit address. And then whoever is watching from outside, oh, this person coming from this school, he went to school and is on his way back. And when the security also ensures that the people who are coming in, or the students who are going into the school are going, so maybe he will put a red stamp in the morning and a green stamp in the afternoon, assuming these kind of scenarios. And what he is doing internally is to get a track of, you know, who is going in and who is going out, at what time he is going in, what time he is going out. All of these details are logged in a register, and that register is called as the routing table. It is just the person who is standing in the middle and conveying all the traffic from one side to the other and the reverse direction. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, we discussed about DNS in the morning, in the start of the session. We also discussed about how the DNS IP address gets assigned. A DNS IP address is, you know, a register of all the publicly available domain names which are registered. We also discussed about what is a domain name. A domain name is nothing but a collection of characters or names attached to an IP address, which is publicly available for access. How do you access that domain name, and what do you get in the form of content? We explained that, and we also saw HTML pages being rendered when you hit a particular google.com website. We also did a sample web page and saved it into your local laptop or a desktop, and then see how that opens up. We also now are going to switch into our conversations in the network, talking about what IP address is all about, what and how does each of your devices at home connect to internet. Now with that, I will actually take a bit of a stop, and then I will shift your next session into a bit more theoretical session. We will talk about what are the different layers of network. We will talk about how IP addresses are maintained. Why do we need IP addresses? And how does the IP addresses from one system connect to another system? And we will also talk about routing and switching. And we also talk about, you know, broadband network, ADSL connection, internet connection, and all these things. I think with that, we will give a bit of an overview of, you know, what is network all about. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask. In fact, I've got another 10 minutes. If you want any questions, I am happy to answer that. Any questions whatsoever around this, I'm happy to answer. I will just stop sharing. I think that's better because it's